You're watching Fox 10 AZAM.
You may want to skip the salad this Thanksgiving. Carmen Blackwell live with details on this might be one of the largest nationwide recalls we've ever shared with you. What's going on here, Carmen?
That's right. Just overnight, guys, we received this huge warning from the CDC about taking the romaine out of the refrigerator. We'll be talking to a produce company about what they're doing to make sure that we're safe at home.
So not what you want to hear the day before Thanksgiving. If you are planning on serving a salad, do not serve romaine lettuce.
Now, this is all because the CDC has issued a massive recall. Carmen is live with all the information you need to know this morning. Carmen?
That's right. Good morning, everyone. And we've already reported about 36 sicknesses already throughout the country. And that's just reports of E. coli. And that's from romaine lettuce. So I'm here at Willie Ituli Produce. And we have Billy here with me, Willie's son. And you're here to basically tell us this came overnight. It was a little scary. You guys had to act fast.
Indeed. You know, we got the alert from the CDC, the outbreak alert. We immediately react and get into what are we going to do, how are we going to respond. Our #1 focus is food safety. So it's informing all of our customers what we pull off the shelves, informing the public, hey, dump it out of your fridge. Don't take the chance. We're not shipping any of that product to our customers today. We can never be too safe. So you just want to be right on the side of caution.
That's right. And so we've also kind of sort of laid out sort of an option here.
Absolutely.
This is an alternative.
Right. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. We're all hungry, want to have a nice feast, and now all of a sudden you have an empty place on the Thanksgiving table.
Right.
So we said to ourselves, what can we offer to people? What can we offer to the public? That'll be a great option, a great alternative. So we have some options here we laid out for you. Iceberg lettuce, just starting out of Yuma this week, so a little locally grown, if you will. Right. That's starting up, but not affected by this whatsoever. If you are so inclined for Bad's product, we have some great Bad spinach, kale, arugula, all options available. You can get them at the grocery store, not affected by this, and can spice up that Thanksgiving meal.
You know what, you said something that was interesting earlier, is that you said that some of these items that we're looking at right now, they're going to spike up in price.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, the romaine market is about 40% of the leafy green market. So when that 40% disappears overnight, you're going to see all these other items spike up in price quite quickly. I'd say in the next couple of days for sure, at the grocery store, you're going to see those prices go up until we recover and figure out some better alternatives.
Right. We might see that for a while too. You said even restaurants are just absolutely probably not going to serve any romaine too.
Absolutely. We encourage that everyone follows the CDC guidelines. They say throw it out, destroy it. You don't want it in your places. We encourage that. We advise everyone to do the same.
That's right. You even said you had some friends call you last night.
They did.
Like, yeah.
Yes. So like, what are we going to cook tomorrow? What are the plans? No Caesar salad, anything of that nature. We said, yeah, toss it out. You know, we do not want anyone to ever take any risks.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you for keeping us in the loop and letting us know. Guys, for Thanksgiving, absolutely no romaine lettuce. It's just not worth the stomach pains and the diarrhea. That's gross too, of course. You don't
and there's so many other alternatives, right?
To romaine, yeah. Yes. But I mean, if you want a good Caesar,
there's nothing else.
That's a romaine base.
Maybe this could be an opportunity for you to plant your own garden, right?
Yeah,
although the romaine won't show up tomorrow.
Hi. I can't. Okay. Okay, we're going to turn to a live poll. Does this video give you anxiety as a business owner selling romaine? Yes or no? Okay, I think we could have guessed this one. Okay. Let's move to our next question. Did anyone in the room not eat romaine at last night's dinner because of what happened? Yes or no? Great. Okay. So I think that's because we all, live in the industry, but I'm not sure that if we asked the same to the general public that we would get the same response. And I think that that's reflective of why it's so important to have this type of conversation. Today we will have a conversation on the most recent romaine advisory. Our world is changing. The way we receive information is near instantaneous and unfiltered. We must be nimble and adapt to current situation. The past year, the Romaine Food Safety Advisory was unlike anything we had experienced before. It left many questions and concerns on how to prepare for the future. We felt that this year's conference was a good platform to get some of our industry's thought leaders together to try and understand how the situation unfolded, what steps were taken to protect the public, and what we can learn from this experience for the future. We are so excited to introduce our panel. I will be introducing each of our guests. However, in your actual app, there's going to be full bios on each one of our participants, but I will just be giving you a brief introduction on each panel member. Arthur, as known as Art, is currently the Senior Advisor for the Food Safety Division of Foodborne, Waterborne, and Environmental Diseases and the CDC. He is the former Director of the CDC Food Safety Office. Ed Tracy is the VP Supply Chain and Sustainability at PMA, has more than 35 years of senior management experience in logistics and supply chain management. In the last 8 years, he has been PMA's expert in developing supply chain practices to lead the produce and floral industries forward. Mariam Walk is the Vice President of Member Services at United Fresh. Her responsibilities include managing United Fresh's membership, recruitment, retention, and engagement activities, volunteer leadership, awards programs, and association publications and resources. Tom LaGrasso is the Chief Operating Officer for LaGrasso Brothers. Ted Keeney is the Vice President of Sales for Keeney Produce and Gourmet, based out of Landover, Maryland. Barbara Hulick is the Senior Director of Food Safety at Produce Alliance and is an industry leader in the rapidly developing food safety management arena. Rob Felgreber is the CFO and General Counsel at Produce Alliance. Let's welcome our panel. Okay, we're going to start with Art. Can you please explain the CDC's approach to the Romaine event and the difference between the FDA's role and the CDC's role? How did you establish the message that the CDC put out?
Thank you. So my first disclaimer is, as a senior advisor, I'm not in the trenches, but I think I have a pretty good idea of what our guys are thinking, and we'll try to answer your questions. And the other disclaimer is that CDC knows a whole lot about the link between illness and a food vehicle or water or a petting zoo, but we know very little, and I know very little about what you do. So if I say something stupid or misleading or incredibly obvious, just set me straight. So this was also, I would say, one of a number of outbreaks that are, using Melissa's word, unlike anything we've seen before. Excuse me. But it started out very much like any other investigation. And so on October 29th, CDC got reports of 10 illnesses due to E. coli 0157. And the PFG pattern, the DNA fingerprint, was very unusual. So a cluster of that many cases of an unusual microbiologic pattern is always, 9 times out of 10, is always going to lead CDC to look deeper. These were, I think these cases were spread out over 3 states at the time, and CDC launched its investigation. What is CDC's role? CDC's role in the investigation is basically finding ill people and getting information on their exposure. FDA is a co-equal partner in these investigations lately, and their job is to gather information on the part they know best. But basically, through the month of November, up until the time of the announcement on the 20th, CDC basically went about working with its state partners to get that information. And so I think about that, over the month of November, ended up with 34 cases, and the exposure history linking to lettuce in general, but romaine in particular, was strong. The microbiologic evidence was strong. And coming off of the Yuma event, which had gone on for, I think, 3 months, CDC was worried that this is just the beginning, the tip of an iceberg, and decided, along with FDA, to go out and make the announcements that it did. Excuse me, I have a little drinking problem.
Go ahead.
So let's see. So how do we get to the messaging? So CDC, we're a bunch of doctors and microbiologists and public health people, but unlike other infectious diseases, there's no antibiotics, there's no vaccines that we can use. Basically, alerting the public so they can protect themselves is our sense of our primary intervention. We're not a regulatory agency, although sometimes we've been accused of trying to act like one. But so a recall intervention that's not in our purview. Not that we would nag somebody who could do it if we thought it was important. So that's one. That's our major intervention for folks. I think in this case, we would like, as in Yuma, we had just coming off of Yuma, we had an experience where we tried to be very targeted in our messaging. So I don't know if you recall, you probably recall better than I. The messages in the beginning were CHOP, Romaine, and then gradually it expanded. So and to a certain extent, I'm second guessing our guys, but I think this was after living through Yuma, worried about it being ongoing. The feeling was to make a broad-based announcement. And then, as you probably saw over the following weeks, we tried to narrow the message from all Romaine to Romaine from Salinas to Romaine from 5 counties. So there's an attempt to be a little more surgical in our alerts, but at the end of the day, CDC as a public health agency is going to have the health of the public as its top priority.
And how did you see this as different than in past situations?
So without getting into things too technically, in the past, so it turned out that there were like 10 different PFG fingerprints, DNA fingerprints. But because of the advances in genomics, basically CDC was able to, and FDA, we were able to associate these 10 patterns into one highly related genome sequence. So we knew that, so we got a lot of cases, all of a sudden we saw a lot of cases that looked like they were clearly linked. The other part of this is actually history. In the past, we've never had the ability to look back. But when we look carefully at this pattern, it was the same pattern that had appeared in Canada in 2017 and also in an investigation in 2016 that was done to focus domestically, but had not ended up reaching any conclusion. But looking back, so what's the difference about this is the precision of the laboratory tools is incredibly high. And instead of just having this year's data, we actually had historic data from the previous year and the year before that added to the evidence base for our concerns.
Got it. Okay. Ed, from the PMA's perspective, how did this food safety alert compare to other situations in the past within the industry?
It was probably the most high profile in recent history. Probably back to the cantaloupes in 2011, and prior to that, spinach in 2006. Going into our busiest holiday, where we sell the most produce at Thanksgiving, and just before that, we cut off business. It was huge. It was different in the fact that it wasn't a recall, it was an advisory. Because it was an advisory, insurance companies had no responsibility to pay the companies they were insuring for pulling this from the supply chain. So the financial impact of this went all the way through the supply chain, all up to the retailers, where typically they deduct their costs from their suppliers, and it's not their problem, and they're not out of pocket. They have inconvenience and lost sales and margin. So this was different in that way because it was an advisory and not a recall to a specific operation.
But I've asked you before that it was a category killer, which you've called it, but we've seen category killers in the past, but those were actual recalls, and this was different because this was advisory?
Yeah, and the fact that the Romaine market died earlier in the year coming out of Yuma with that, and now we're back, two in a span of 6 or 7 months, really woke up the industry again. Unfortunately, we need tragedies like this when people get sick and die, kind of people figure out, oh, we need to do something now. That also weighed into heavily the Romaine task force that was created to say, we got to figure something out. We're just not good enough at this right now.
And then we've seen that this was also unique. I mean, obviously it was Thanksgiving, which was hugely different. And then also with social media and the fact that this was, I mean, yes, we saw cantaloupe, we saw spinach, but this was real time. And I think that was what probably was most unique also, just how the messaging got out so quickly. Don't you think that that was also a unique factor?
Absolutely, yeah. We're, normally we can control and get some, at least a few hours heads up advice that this is coming out, and our organizations get together with our boards and try to craft the messaging. But yeah, in today's age, you have no time. There is no ramp up time. It's on, and you can't control the messaging. And when I saw your poll that 10% of the people still don't eat romaine, we've not done a good job, because there's, romaine's safe right now.
Well, and that's of this industry. I mean, if we were
scary.
in the public,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I asked someone last night, and they said they felt kale was up so much because kale Caesars are still a big thing to replace romaine. So I think that's a truth that's really out there. But I think, so that was very interesting. Okay, so if that's the case, so how did this one, how did this feel different? We kind of answered that, but do you think there's anything else to add on how this felt different compared to things you'd seen in the past?
No, it's just the speed and the timing. They were, the speed that the message spread, and then the timing just going into Thanksgiving. We never had a major outbreak or recall or advisory at that time of year.
Right. Great. Miriam, how was United Fresh involved in this food safety alert? And from this situation, can you tell us about the task force that has since formed?
Sure. So you've heard a little bit from Dr. Liang and Ed about kind of how the timeline works, so I'll give you from our perspective what we saw. I would say about a week before the big announcement, our food safety people started seeing the facts, the signs and the signals that an outbreak was happening. They were looking at data, they were hearing some rumors, they were having some conversations. So at that point, she reached out to FDA and CDC to ask, hey guys, what's going on? And at that point, they confirmed, yes, we're seeing something that signals an outbreak, but we haven't yet honed in on what the exact food source is. So we continued to have these conversations, and then the night before the big announcement happened, my colleague Jennifer McIntyre was talking to one of Dr. Liang's colleagues at CDC, and at that point they said, it looks like it's romaine. We've honed in on that as the source. Prepare for an announcement tomorrow. Well, of course, that happens, and that says to us, let's get together with all of our industry partners, with PMA, with some of the leafy green associations, with Western growers, and let's start thinking about what our strategy is going to be, because we knew it was obviously going to be a big, huge signal event for our industry, and it was going to be important for all of us to be aligned. So that being based in DC, we're really used to working with a lot of the federal agencies. It's a core competency for us. And our big goal at that point is, how do we get the markets to reopen? I mean, it was obviously, you saw all the footage with things being pulled off the shelves. You all know it firsthand. We talked about how consumers were lacking confidence, and we wanted to bring that back and make sure that we could get the markets reopen. So as part of that conversation, we agreed to form this task force and really hone in on 4 key areas. One was getting to the bottom of ag water and really coming up with a scientific system there. The second is what we do with positives when it comes to testing. A lot of times when it came to finished product testing or test and hold, it was really just a matter of, okay, we know we need to get rid of the product, but are we really investigating what the root cause was for that positive test? Really getting to the bottom of traceability, and I know, Ed, you're the expert here, but we know that the industry really needed to commit to being serious about traceability through the entire supply chain from field to fork. And then also, making sure that we settled on some sort of labeling that would make it transparent to the consumer of where things were being harvested from. And we were asked to do this in 90 days, starting from Thanksgiving. So you can imagine that's a tall order. There's another small holiday called Christmas in there. So but we did it. We got together with PMA, and we did form a task force that has met. We decided to focus on senior executives to start keeping it small so that we could get the work done in a small window. FDA and CDC asked us to really get the buy side involved as well, so we focused on doing that. And I would say that work's going well, and we know our main goal is, because a lot of people have had questions, why wasn't I asked to be a part of this? You know, why wasn't my business asked? And part of it was the scope and things that we needed to get done, but we know we need to do a good job of communicating. And I know, talking to our folks, when we've had a gap in knowledge, that we've been able to go back to the industry and add more people to the conversation. So I would say look for a lot more communication about the work of that task force coming out soon.
Art, hearing from Miriam and hearing from Ed, do you think that there was anything that you would have known or that the group would have wanted to know that would have changed the steps that were taken throughout the process? Or as we've talked about, if there's more information that could be known to change any future events throughout the chain?
So I'm just going to repeat the obvious, and that is, especially if you looked at the way the messaging rolled out, that let me half step back. So traditionally, in the old days, CDC's message was actionable to the extent that we usually wouldn't communicate till we had the smoking gun. You know, so not to be inappropriate, but you know, it's Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with a candlestick. So in this case, if you look at our messaging, it was focused on geography, because we're looking at person, place, and time and trying to get back to what we see as the source. So that's our default right now. And then if the people in this room can think of better ways of keeping the message focused and actionable, I'm open to it.
Yeah, and we've talked about the fact that, you know, we, Produce Alliance, will be coming to, you know, present at the CDC in May and talking about communication and even how the messaging was written. Well, we were faced with a tough decision of how we talked about it in the food service industry. It didn't say dispose. So yes, when Billy was speaking, we were speaking to the consumer, and on the retail side, it said to dispose of the product. But when we were looking at the messaging itself, in the food service world, it just said to not serve. So when we were looking at that, it was a tough messaging. We just kept saying follow the CDC's advisory, and that messaging wasn't clear on whether to dispose of or to, what's the wording, Barb? To segregate and to hold. And so that messaging was one we weren't sure of how the messaging, you know, if that was a clear indication on the food service side versus the retail, or, you know, that what the direction was from the CDC.
So that's actually great feedback for CDC, because as you heard my disclaimer, you know, we know a lot about linking illness and vehicles, you know, whether it's a swimming pool or food, but we don't know a lot about the supply chain and who needs to hear what. We're either relying on FDA, that we presume knows you guys better, or I guess ultimately you know your business better. We're going to be, this will be a good teachable moment for us.
Fantastic. And that's what we hope to do in that meeting. Okay, Tom, from the distributor standpoint, reflecting on that day, is there anything that you wish you would have known that would have helped you in reacting at the time, or that would have helped in the future reacting in similar situation? From the information you did receive, what decisions did you have to make as an organization?
Thank you, Melissa. Very excited to be here with all of you. Hopefully I can represent the distributors well up here in the conversation. You asked a lot of great questions, so I'm going to try and stay on script and to the points. First off, with the info we had on that day when Billy was shooting that video for Fox, did a great job. We had to do exactly what Billy did. We had to pull all of the Romaine product from our warehouse. We had to follow the CDC's recommendation, the way it was worded, and we had to actively sell not to consume Romaine. As a business owner, that's tough when I sell Romaine every single day, to now actively sell against a product I'm selling today. That led also to significant losses, because it was a market withdrawal and it wasn't a recall tied to a specific grower. So what that means is all of the inventory in our warehouse we had to dump and didn't have coverage against. All of our inbound trucks into us we had to dump and didn't have coverage against. And for all of our customers, retailers, restaurants, they had a loss there that we couldn't help cover because our loss was already too great. So with the broad market withdrawal, that led to all of that. So as I reflect on the video that day and some of the things that I wish I would have changed in a perfect world, would be when the statement came out that it was tied specifically to a grower. And so in a perfect world, I wish that would have been the case, because then it would be a recall instead of a broad withdrawal. Our communication to our customers would be much more efficient. We could narrow down specifically to if a restaurant was impacted or not impacted by this. We would be covered by cost if we did purchase from that grower, because we would put all of the loss back on them. We'd be able to cover our customers' losses, or if Romaine was still fine, we could still actively sell and promote Romaine to our customers that were using it from good sources that weren't impacted by that recall. So that would have made the whole situation better in a perfect world. But at least thinking back to it and listening to what you have touched on, understanding that from your point of view, you need to issue a warning for public health and safety. Is there a way that we could change the wording or change the approach? Where it's more of a tiered system like the State Department with travel advisories, where you put out a warning to use caution in consuming romaine. So for example, the State Department has a 1 through 4 scale. So like Mexico, everything that's been going on in Mexico the past couple of years, people dying, they're a level 2 out of 4 of issue caution if you decide to travel there, where Syria is a 4 on that scale. You could put out a statement, and I wrote it down. There's an active investigation going into E. coli that is linked to romaine. Consumers should use heightened awareness if you are pregnant, elderly, or have a health risk when consuming romaine. A statement like that would allow us to continue to sell romaine, actively promote it. Just like my wife, when she was pregnant, she wasn't eating sushi or medium rare steak. She could not eat a Caesar salad for a couple weeks, months, until I told her it was all clear. So those are some of the follow-up points that I wanted to touch on.
So, one, thanks for alerting me to that great question. And two, let me give a bit of an academic answer. But you know, the public health epidemiology textbooks actually defines risk not as can something bad happen, but what's the probability. So conceptually, I really like the idea of trying to send messages that are risk-based. Unfortunately, the current state of the art, you know, from outbreak investigations alone, you don't really get a denominator. You know, so many cases over whatever portions or however you want to, whatever you want to pick as a valid denominator to grade risk. So I think it's a great play, a great concept. I think it's probably going to take more. You know, State Department draws on probably all kinds of intelligence. The public health community, in order to put out those kinds of alerts, probably is going to need to draw on a lot of the intelligence and probably intel that's coming from this community and that's represented by this audience.
So,
You
jump in.
Just to add something I think that might have been helpful to you all is also, and to CDC to know, is that romaine wasn't being harvested in certain regions, but was still impacted by the withdrawal. So we had folks in Florida, we had folks that were doing the controlled atmosphere, the indoor growing on the East Coast, and that they were saying scientifically there's no way with the dates of the illnesses that our product could have been impacted. But the instructions our industry got was you still had to pull your product. So I think that's something that could be improved in the future as well.
So we need to keep this kind of dialogue going, you know, because we already heard I heard similar things from retailers who said, well, look, you know, you're lumping me in there with all the guys who don't invest the bazillions of dollars that my chain invests. And so, or, you know, we're part of LGMA, and doesn't that mean something? So the quick answer is, it probably should. I don't know that the public health community has quite figured out what it is, though, and we'll probably need more discussions like this.
Well, also, and what's coming out of the traceability task force, of the Romaine task force, the traceability subgroup, we as an industry need to do a better job in order to give them the information so they can do a supplier-specific recall. One of the challenges is, and it came out in the Yuma investigation, and you and I were talking about it this morning, in this investigation, while somewhere around 60% of all fresh produce cases are labeled with a PTI label. And so the supply side, and that's basically one retailer and a handful of others demanding it. So we're getting pretty good cooperation on that from the supply side. The last mile, and I know CDC or FDA, I think, was critical, and rightfully so, that they're not doing their part on traceability. So the retailers and the food service operators, there's a handful of food service operators that are, but the retailers in particular, other than a couple, they're not doing their part. And they're frustrating the traceback investigation to try to figure out the source. Because when they ask people, what did you eat 2 weeks ago, and name every meal, okay, where did you get it? And they go back and I got it at this retail store or this restaurant. They go and they talk to the operators of the restaurant or the store, and they say, tell me about the romaine that you served or sold on last Thursday or two weeks ago Thursday. And they're going, I don't know. I got it from my supplier or my warehouse. And well, did you track anything? Did you track the lot number or anything on the case? No, we didn't do anything. That takes them a huge amount of time to go from the retail or restaurant to their supplier, their distributor, their own DC, and then going through all the paper records and trying to trace back and link and eventually figure out the lot numbers of this product so they can find a point of convergence. And that's what we're trying to solve with the Traceability Task Force. And where we've landed, and we've been doing PTI since I got to PMA 8 years ago, and 55% or so of the cases are labeled. We have 6 billion cases in circulation, so we've labeled well over 3.5 billion cases. That's good, but what we're not doing anything with it at the other end. The end that is really, really critical in getting these investigations sped up. So what's going to be coming out of that, and actually some good is coming out of it, very good is coming out of the task force. FDA and Jennifer McIntyre and myself have been working with FDA since September last year for them to develop a template of data that they want when they're doing a traceback investigation. So they're supposed to have delivered it to us last Friday. A little bit late, but we'll be okay with it. And that's basically probably going to be an Excel spreadsheet because they're not very sophisticated from a system perspective. But it will have a very defined set of information, headings on the rows and the values, and here's how you fill it. When FDA comes knocking, fill out this form, hit a button, email it to them. They can put them all together, and they can do their traceback investigation at lightning speed compared to what we do today. And the other, so our focus for the task force is going to be when the case is closed, put a label on it and document the information around that. So what lot number, GTIN, and what it means. And when the case is open, retail or restaurant, capture that information. You don't necessarily have to, the restaurant or the retail store doesn't have to capture it, but what we're going to be putting out is they need to provide the information in that template within 2 hours of FDA contacting them. Well, for food service establishments, that's most likely going to fall on you people to provide that information within 2 hours. We have, and part of the task force, is a number of food service associations and companies and very senior executives represented. And some of them saying, well, I can provide that information. I know where I bought my lettuce, and I'll call my supplier and go, hold on. You're not going to get all that within 2 hours. You'd be lucky if they returned, you contact your distributor, they contact their suppliers. All that's not going to happen in 2 hours. We need to step up and make a commitment that we're going to be able to provide this information. This company, from what I've seen, you guys are probably starting in a pretty good position.
I'll jump in here. To take that, I'm hearing a lot of communication, and at least from real life experience with us, when a restaurant reaches out to us, an operator says there's been a sickness reported, the state of Michigan, because we're based in Detroit, their health department reaches out to us saying they're investigating a case, we immediately provide the information and then loop in Produce Alliance and their team in a real life example, because if they're identifying a specific grower to, we'll just stay with Romaine, we want to share that information with Produce Alliance, so if they hear of another case in another state, okay, now let's do some more digging, let's provide more information, let's be more communicative and upfront to help drive that, so we understand if it was isolated, if it's a specific grower, that there's multiple, now let's communicate that and share it with the entire network. So I think that kind of communication, looping in a national organization, your organizations, if you're having communication ahead of time of announcement, reach out to organizations like ours that have access to real life data on, we think it could be Romaine and these number of farms. Well, we know where that product's gone in our supply chain. Has that hit on any of your cases too?
Yeah. And thank you for that, and we will definitely keep you in the loop, as we do most major through associations. Where we didn't get as much pushback from the food service side of the world when we were having these discussions on this traceability task force, where we got more pushback was from the big retailers. Not the biggest, because they're doing it now. they're doing it beyond expectation. But from FMI and the NGA, National Grocers Association, they push back and go, oh, we can't do this, it's too hard. And go, you can't afford not to, because you just told us how much this devastated your members financially from one advisory, and now you're saying you're not going to be able to provide at least a range of GTN and lot numbers that were in your facility when you service those stores. That's what we need. We need that level of granularity. The food service people, some of them go, hey, we scan it right into the store. No problem. We got it today. It's easy. The retailers, they're going to get, we're having to push them. It was very interesting in the meeting in Dallas. Frank Yanis is now the Deputy Commissioner of Food at FDA. Frank Yanis was with Walmart as VP of Food Safety and Health. He's the guy who implemented the blockchain solution with IBM that is now tracking all their leafy greens up to the blockchain from point of shipment all the way through, and they're even scanning at every Walmart store. So his message was, in not so many words, but don't tell me it can't be done. I did it at the largest retailer in the world. And so we now have a new threat, if you will, out there that if we don't get our act together as an industry and commit to doing this, they're going to legislate it and they're going to regulate it. And they don't want to do that, but their patience is running out. But they don't like people getting sick and dying in this day and age with this technology and where we're at with our electronic communication capabilities. There's just no reason for it.
And I think that's packed with a lot of messages, and that's like part of our message this morning is, moving our companies forward into the future and the importance of WMS and that technology. Art, do you want to respond to any of that, or should I move on to Savannah? Okay.